Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. A busy weekend at Mar-a-Lago. President-elect Donald Trump making his first appointments, starting with a border czar.
He was the architect, I think, behind some of the separation of families last time around, which has raised questions. But there are millions of people who are here illegally.
What's the economic impact of Trump's campaign promises, from mass deportations to across-the-board tariffs? Lazard CEO Peter Orszag weighs in.
Even the tariffs, which will put upward pressure on inflation, create an incentive for cross-border M&A because you want to locate, your operations inside of the tariff wall.
Plus, the Property Brothers from HGTV with a new show about homeowners who can't move, and some ideas for making money building additional units on your property.
It's a she shed, isn't it?
I mean, there could be anything you want. Yeah, you could have it as a she shed. Somebody else might have
I want a she shed.
A man cave.
It's Monday, November 11th, 2024. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue, please.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick, along with Joe Kernan and Andrew Ross Sorkin.
President-elect Trump announcing last night that Tom Homan is going to be his administration's border czar. He's the former acting director of the U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement and currently a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation. He was a contributor to Project 2025 and that mandate leadership effort. He has previously vowed to, quote, run the biggest deportation force this country has ever seen. The Post announcing the hire, Trump saying that Homan would be in charge of, quote, all deportation of illegal aliens back to their country of origin. And this is the beginning in many ways. Lots of questions about how this is all going to be put together, what that's actually going to look like. If there's a way to do it in hopefully a humane way, and
he was the go-to guy. On
this was the guy, but this goes.
No, he's the go-to guy on a lot of our competing networks to criticize the Biden administration for the border policies, and now here he is in a position where he can actually do what he said should have been done.
But a big part
along.
of the Project 2025, which, by the way, so there's other people who are looking at this and saying that President Trump had said he was not behind Project 2025.
I don't think he ever said he wasn't going to do the deportation.
No. But I'm saying but that's the other anxiety side of it. There's got to be a way to deal with immigration in an important way. I think the whole country agrees with it. So now it's just a matter of how it actually gets executed.
Right. It's I don't know whether I call it inhumane, but it's going to be tough either way. Going to be tough. There's going to be.
He was the architect, I think, behind some of the separation of families last time around, which has raised questions. But there are millions of people who are here illegally. And this is something that we knew was going to be dealt with, that this is a big issue. That, again, was a very powerful part of the election for Trump, too. This was his first issue that he talked about long before even inflation.
Two other familiar names who won't be running to the Trump administration, Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo. They're not going to be part of this. Haley served as U.S. ambassador during Trump's first term, then challenged him in the primary this cycle. Pompeo was Trump's Secretary of State. Both spoke critically of Trump during the primary process, but eventually endorsed his nomination, vocally supported him. In a post on Truth Social, Trump saying that he will not be inviting them to join the administration, thank them for their service to the country.
Well, the UN ambassador, but UN ambassador Nikki Haley ran against Trump.
Yeah, what was the
primaries?
Pompeo?
Pompeo did not run for president, but was frequently mentioned as a possible president. The Journal weighs in. It's the lead editorial that says that the ascendancy of Don Jr. and Tucker Carlson in the pick of J.D. Vance for vice president, they're talking about 2028 already, and many times presidents don't have certain cabinet members from the last administration, but they don't say specifically,
right, you're not
way
in.
Before January 20th, they don't say these two people will not be in. So it's odd to see that, right. And there's some message there, and the message is that Pompeo, if you have designs on 2028, you aren't going to bolster your resume for the next 4 years.
And similarly with Nikki Haley, if you thought that she was going to come back.
Haley.
Interestingly, remember, Nikki Haley was vehemently against him. I mean, just I mean, completely against him.
She said the first person that gets rid of either Trump or Biden is going to. She said that will elect Kamala Harris, so she was wrong about that.
But then I was going to say, then she switched gears completely, and then seemed to be frustrated, if you remember,
that she wasn't invited around,
that she wasn't even being included in any of the campaigns.
She got like 17% of the vote in Indiana still, even after she had dropped out. She was one of the very last to come back around and say, okay, she was in favor of him. And there had been the Wall Street Journal and others saying you should welcome in Haley and any of her supporters. But this was before the election.
I don't remember Pompeo being critical.
That's what I was trying to remember,
I don't
too.
remember him being critical. I always remember him being sort of, and he was able to say, I did this along with President Trump. Right. We did these things, and they were all positive for
I didn't remember a falling out with Pompeo.
But I can certainly understand, J.D. Vance is our guy at this point, and I think he helped the campaign a lot. There's no doubt, especially from that debate on. And then he was everywhere, constantly, no matter how hostile the venue.
Well, and Trump even said that on election night, going into the next morning when he came out and spoke. He said, J.D. Vance, when he called him up to the stage, he said he would go anywhere, places nobody else wanted to go, and talk and kind of jumped at the occaon. And he spoke about
Trump
that
feels
day
overshadowed by him because he's almost is a protege. He's 40 years old, whatever.
I have one question on the immigration piece of this. Mm-hmm. What do you think it's going to? What do you think the immediate impact is going to be on the economy? Because there's going to be lots of people who are going to. Some of them are going to voluntarily leave, right? And then there's going to be a whole other group who are going to be scared. Obviously, there's going to be less people coming to the country, which is a huge part of the goal of this administration. But the other piece is you're going to have folks who are working in construction, on golf courses.
Kashkari talked about this over the weekend.
Nannies, all sorts of stuff that are all of a sudden are going to have to
Neil Kashkari talked about it over the weekend and said the impact on inflation, which I think a lot of people look to that. What would the impact on inflation be if you suddenly have to pay more for wages than you had been in a lot of these positions before? He says we're going to have to wait and see how it's carried out, how it goes, but it is something Fed officials are watching already.
There's always been two counter arguments. One is that these are jobs, many of them that legalized American citizens don't want. But then there's always the other argument that they're getting jobs and taking them away from people that have done it the right way and come here.
Yeah, but the question is, do you have to pay more for that? Are there jobs that are being paid below what?
And 13 million is, I don't. 13 million is a lot of people.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying.
And
if it's going to happen quickly,
the other question is, what do you do?
Cost that will be expensive.
The other question is, what do you do with legal immigration? And I will say this because I was talking to some HB2 visa immigrants over the weekend who were working in a place that I was staying. They are here from Jamaica, from the Caribbean, from other places. And if you have a mass influx of legalized immigration, it may offset some of the inflationary actions. It just depends on how many of those visas you're willing to give out.
Great, it's amazing, but he made strides in Latino voters. The demo was much.
The people who were here legely were the ones who are very much on that side.
They're saying we don't like this either. Yeah. So it's complicated. Man, it's only hasn't been a week yet, has it? President-elect Trump involved himself publicly in the Senate leadership race for the first time. He posted on Truth Social that anyone running to be the next Senate Majority Leader should agree to let him make recess appointments to his cabinet. That would allow appointees to bypass Senate confirmation. You need 60 votes. The three candidates running to replace Mitch McConnell quickly weighed in on the issue. Senator Rick Scott of Florida said he agreed with President-elect Trump. Senator John Cornyn of Texas said the Constitution gives the president the power to make recess appointments, and Senator John Thune of South Dakota said all options are on the table to get the president's nominees in place.
Wait a second. Cornyn said it gives the president the power to make recess appointments?
Yeah.
The existing president?
They all said we're on board, basically. They have to because they're all vying to
try and get this job. Yeah.
Including recess appointments, Republican senators are expected to vote in a secret ballot for Majority Leader on Wednesday.
And there was some kick up over the weekend I was reading about just the idea of having that race right now that McConnell, they thought, was doing in some ways an end run around allowing President Trump to have more influence on this by making it happen quickly and making it happen now.
But Elon Musk endorsed Rick Scott. Others endorsed.
I thought the most interesting thing was Elon Musk endorsing Mike Lee's comments over the weekend about ending the Fed's independence. I thought that was far and away the most uniquely interesting thing. Mike Lee argued that he said, quote, the executive branch should be under the direction of the president. Yet another reason we should hashtag end the Fed.
What do you mean? The executive branch should be under the executive branch is? You mean
and that the Fed should be part of the executive branch.
So the Fed should be part of the executive branch.
He believes that I don't want to put words in his mouth. Believes that the executive branch constitutionally that this is should technically be part of that. Maybe we have it here, and he writes, there you have it. And Elon Musk saying 100%. He said that's how the Constitution was designed. So if this becomes a quote-unquote constitutional issue, we're to go to the Supreme Court of the United States.
I understand the argument about constitutionality, but the world and the economy and the country have changed drastically over those hundreds of years. And the idea of, have you ever heard a president who didn't want lower rates? I mean, that's the only question that raises.
Next on Squawk Pod, the Wall Street post-election view. Lazard CEO Peter Orszag. He's ready for mergers and acquisitions to pick up in a second Trump administration, even if his personal vote was for someone else.
Democracy has spoken, and I'm focused on helping our clients navigate the new environment.
You told me you were excited and it might actually be better.
For our business, temporarily, yes.
This is Squawk Pod.
Up and Andrew, Q.
You're watching Squawk Box on this Monday morning on CNBC. I'm Andrew Sorkin along with Joe Kernan and Becky Quick.
Joining us right now to talk markets, the Fed, deal making, and what it could look like once President-elect Trump takes office is Lazard CEO Peter Orszag. He is, of course, the former director of the Office of Management and Budget under President Obama. Peter, let's just talk about the markets because we haven't probably spent enough time analyzing this and seeing what was happening. Last week, you saw the biggest move for the Russell 2000 in 4.5 years. You saw massive gains for all of the major averages. The biggest gains, I think, for the S&P, for the Dow transports in over a year. And somebody explained this to me, a really big player, somebody who understands the markets and has made a ton of money in the markets, and said, look, this is what you get when you have the most anti-business, pro-regulation business administration going to the complete opposite of that. What do you think the markets are telling us?
Yeah, I think a lot of this has to do with expectations of a lower corporate rate, more deal making. Those are all positive. There's a little bit of pressure on the bond yield, which may offset this eventually. But I think the biggest thing is right now we're in, everything is possible. And what's happening right now is the transition is the time when the glorious hype of a campaign starts to meet the grim reality of governing. And so the real question is what happens over the next 70 days to prioritize all the things that have been discussed, and I think that's going to have very substantial effects on the market.
And within those priorities, things that are good for business, things that would not be so good for business.
I mean, the things that are beneficial are what I just said, which is, a different M&A regulatory environment, a lower corporate rate may spur additional activity. Even the tariffs, which will put upward pressure on inflation, create an incentive for cross-border M&A because you want to locate your operations inside of the tariff wall.
All right, I like this, an investment banker type, thinking of how some of these things work. What would upset the apple cart? What would change the market's perspective of what's happening here?
Look, I think there are lots of things that can go sideways, and this is not specific to this administration, that's just a statement of life in the world. And I think if you started to see, I would be paying particular attention to the people appointed, and so far this has gone really well. I think the choice for chief of staff is a very solid one, for example. If you started to see people who were, the people are going to matter a lot. Let me put it that way. I think that might be the first indication that something would go off kilter, or that this is actually pretty promising. And there, lots of people who said they would never serve in a second Trump administration are now raising their hand to serve in a second Trump administration.
Wouldn't it be amazing if it really did come true that the deregulation, along with maybe a more efficient government if Elon Musk actually were able to do that.
We'll come back to that. Yeah.
Okay, but if that was able to offset some of the effects of the tariffs, which maybe don't be not fully implemented because countries around the world try to preempt that by becoming more open and more trade friendly than they are right now. What if it all worked? I mean, that would be
great. I would say, I think one of the things from the most recent election cycle, not just in the US, but across the world, is inflation is really unpopular with the voters. Now, we can talk through what caused inflation in the US. I don't think the common narrative about the ARP is correct, but put that to the side. The risk in many of these things is that they appear attractive now, but if they actually do raise inflation, that can come back to haunt you later. And that's true for the tariffs. It's true for some of the immigration policies.
The other thing that I said, I'm hoping are deflationary and offset.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe that's what we're hearing.
You said put a pin in the Elon discussion.
So
what is that about for you?
I am hoping for the success of Elon Musk in doing this. I would just say, if you look back at the history of rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse back to Elaine Kmark and reinventing government as part of the Clinton administration and so on and so forth, this is an example where it's really easy to say, it's really hard to do. I wish him and them
what it was
somebody who knows this stuff.
Yeah.
What is on the table and what's not on the table?
Because everything that looks wasteful is typically there for some kind of reason, and it's got some kind of constituency that is protecting it. So it is. It's like raising taxes, the same thing. It's easy to say, but then when you get down to the details.
But in terms of, not they're just executive action, but, within departments that have to hire or not hire, they can choose not to hire people, right? There are certain things they can do, and then there's certain things they can't do.
Oh, in terms of, executive order and regulatory versus legislative, they can do a fair amount just through executive order.
And how much cutting could you do that way? What do you think the upper bound limit of cutting just from an executive action perspective is possible?
All right, so let's back up here and just remind ourselves that the vast majority of government spending is in entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. We're not talking about that. So then you have to carve out the Defense Department. Not clear what. Now, the whole Defense Department, the way we invest in the military probably does need to change. I think there's a real concern, and maybe the new administration can get to the heart of this, about whether we're investing in the right types of systems, whether we're tech savvy, but put defense to the side. The problem is you're down to such a small share at that point of overall government spending that even if you take 10 or 20% off of it, you're not really denting the overall trajectory.
Eamon brought up the other day this idea of the civil service protections. What does that prevent you from doing? What does that allow you to do?
So this was, again, I think it's a little bit unclear exactly what will happen here, but let's remember the civil service protections were put in place in order to protect the professionals of the federal government from undue partisanship and political interference. Now, the counter argument that Trump folks will make is that perhaps the bureaucracy has kind of drifted to have a particular political view, and that was not the intention of those protections.
Okay, let me ask you, as somebody who was a former person serving in the Obama administration, but somebody who's running an investment bank right now, how do you feel about this election? Your party didn't win, but you were dealing with such
I think I made my personal views clear, but the election, as we were talking about right before we went on, was crystal clear. Democracy has spoken, and I'm focused on helping our clients navigate the new environment.
You told me you were excited and it might actually be better.
For our business, temporarily, yes. I think that's true.
Okay. I took that as a win.
You were happy with that.
I took that as a win.
Yes.
All right. You mentioned immigration. We've been discussing immigration at the table, both in terms of the humanity of just how this all gets executed, but also the inflationary pressures that it could create. By the way, hopefully the offsets, because I got a text from somebody saying, what about all the money that we're spending, giving out debit cards and other things in New York and other places. Obviously, I think you're part of the Partnership for New York and others that are trying to work on this immigration problem. Do you think there's going to be an inflationary effect? Are we going to see stories in 3 months from now about how restaurants can't find enough folks in the back office, how golf clubs are going to be shutting down, or their costs are going to go up?
This is a good example of my point about campaign versus governing. We'll have to see exactly how far this goes. I think it remains to be seen. But if you did even if it were justified, and I think I understand the
I'm not arguing it's not justified. I'm just talking about the economic implications.
The narrow effect of removing a significant part of the workforce is to put upward pressure on wages and therefore inflation. I mean, that's, I think, clear. That doesn't mean you should or shouldn't do it. It's just that's one of the consequences.
What do you hear from people? Were there deals that were awaiting to be done, determined by the election? Are there people who are all of a sudden like, yeah, we're moving ahead with this deal. We've been kind of talking about it, thinking about it, and now game on? I'd
say up until maybe 2 or 3 months ago, that wasn't really happening. But in the last couple of months, it made sense for people to say, look, this is a good idea, but why don't we wait?
Right.
Well, no, either way, but why don't we wait and see what the environment's like, and we may present it slightly differently. And yes, we are extremely busy now.
So what does that tell you about deal activity for next year?
We were already in a cycle where the M&A was picking up, partly because private equity was coming back onto the playing field. So this is just accelerating what was already a rapidly developing M&A cycle.
Financials, I assume you think that there are going to be a lot of small bank mergers?
I hope so. I mean, for a while, as I've been pointing out, we needed to consolidate regional and community banks. The antitrust authorities were getting in the way of that. It makes sense to consolidate.
Clean energy companies that may no longer get subsidies, we'll see what happens. Do they end up having to merge because they're going to be more troubled?
Possibly. I mean, let's see. I mean, remember, a lot of the support goes to deeply Republican states. I mean, Texas is a leading example of it, so we'll see what happens there. But it is entirely possible that one of the sectors that's harmed here is the renewable.
And we've talked about the Fed a lot this morning, but do you have any view that there could actually be a court case brought effectively against the constitutionality of the Federal Reserve as constructed today as an independent entity, and whether it should be part of the executive branch, which is something that Mike Lee and now Elon Musk is endorsing, which is raising a question that I think was not on the table, or at least a lot of people's bingo card a week ago?
So I'd say two things. I mean, I always remember Paul Volcker once said, the Congress created us and the Congress can uncreate us. So this is an institution that was created by the Congress, and it doesn't need to exist. But the reason it exists and the reason it has independence is the evidence suggests that independent central banks produce better outcomes. So what I would say is, I think it's in President Trump's interest to have an independent Federal Reserve because it produces the evidence is overwhelming that independence for the central bank produces a better combination of inflation and employment, which is what you want.
Would the market freak out if it thought the Fed was not going to be independent?
I think that would be, you asked earlier about what could be destabilizing. I think that could be destabilizing.
I have one last independence question, and I ask it to you as somebody who I know is a Democrat, who I imagine may be one of the kinds of people who could raise some of these questions in the future, but we'll see. There are going to be a lot of business people who are going to go into this administration, right? Many who may, in almost a post-World War II approach to some of this. And Elon Musk may be the sort of avatar for all of that. There's going to be questions invariably about conflicts of interest. And invariably, there are going to be folks who are going to get waivers. There was a story over the weekend about how Howard Lutnick is, of course, running this transition team. He's going to be putting people in place who are going to regulate the SEC and other institutions who effectively are, quote unquote, supposed to be overseeing his own business. How does someone like you think about the balance between the expertise, hopefully, that some of these people bring to bear and the benefit that taxpayers may get as a result, if you believe that's the case, and whatever enrichment appears to be on the other side
Tesla
of it?
was up, I think, 30% last week. It's up another $20 today to $341. So I think that's kind of what you're talking about, is it not?
Lazard's up a lot too. So
I wasn't even going there, but I do think
it's pretty amazing.
People may raise that question too. I'm not against these people being
earlier that all the subsidies we were talking, they're all going to Tesla now. I don't know whether not true, but I think Tesla's going to do okay.
The short answer is this: I think there were many groups that became too pure about a potential conflict if you look at it from this particular angle. Now we could go too far the other way. So I think it is something worth watching. I haven't seen anything that is particularly troubling. Howard Lutnick is a friend of mine, and I think a lot of that reporting seems off to me. But we have to wait and see. And you got
to get out of here and go start proposing some mergers.
Well, there's plenty going on.
Because it's ready. The time is now. Get out of here and go do what you're supposed to do. Because baby, you're back.
There's no paying customers in this room.
You are back.
Thank you.
Peter, thank you.
Thank you.
tease will be next.
Still to come on Squawk Pod, the property brothers from HGTV, Drew Scott and Jonathan Scott, working with homeowners stuck in place. Higher mortgage rates have made many stay put.
They want to move. They hate their house, but then they realize all the additional costs and everything that come with moving, and it's not worth it for them.
The developer entrepreneur bros on how to love a house as a long-term investment.
Try and find a house that you can grow your family into. Every time you move, you lose a lot of your equity to legal fees, taxes, everything else. Find a home that you can fix and make it your own.
You're listening to Squawk Pod. Here's Becky Quick.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Mortgage rates remain elevated. The average 30-year fixed rate has been above 6% for 2 years, and it's definitely put some pressure in terms of people looking to move. Our next guests are actually talking directly to homeowners who can't move in a new show they have. It's called Don't Hate Your House. It premieres Wednesday on HGTV. And joining us right now are the property brothers. We have Jonathan Scott and Drew Scott, who are co-founders of Scott Brothers Global. We know you guys as the property brothers, but we also know you guys as just Jonathan and Drew.
Ass kickers of the home space. That's what I say. Can I say that?
Fashion mavens, whenever you come in. Facial hair mavens.
I'm in the Handsome Men's Beard Club. He's not quite there yet, but
are you trying?
You've been there for a while, Drew.
Not very
Or is that deliberate?
Everyone said a little scruff looks good, right? So,
But he goes.
But Jonathan, that's new. Drew, you've had the beard for a while.
and I also didn't cover my grays today. I just wanted to feel more knowledgeable.
Sometimes cover the grays?
Oh, I do sometimes.
What do you use to do that for the audience so that we know?
I don't even know what the product is.
Okay.
My wife gave it to me. Thank you, Linda. You make me look younger. But the wisdom is coming out today for you guys.
The problem
is
he spent so much
money fixing that face, and then he just covered it all with a beard. Exactly. But it's fun to be at work site. 2 days until we launch the new show. But this is all about the people that they want to move. They hate their house. But then they realize all the additional costs and everything that come with moving, and it's not worth it for them. So trying to find ways to love your house again and be able to afford it. And that's what we think is so interesting right now, because nobody would have expected, the 30-year rates to increase. We even, right now there's a massive lack of inventory, which causes housing to become so expensive.
Yeah.
We've been harping on people for the longest time. That's why I try and find a house that you can grow your family into. Every time you move, you lose a lot of your equity to legal fees, taxes, everything else. Find a home that you can fix and make it your own, and you're going to be way better off in the long run.
And that's been a huge issue. You guys have talked about this too, the undersupply of housing right now. That's a big part of the problem.
Yeah.
People are stuck in their homes. They can't find a new place.
Yeah.
And they've got kids living with them for a lot longer than they used to.
And you know what? Some families love that. I don't see. My wife wants to keep our kids there until they're 50. I want to make sure they get their own place at 18. No, but they the way finding an ADU or option to have a secondary income with the property is one of the best ways that people can help offset the housing shortage. There are so many houses that have the ability to have a second unit or even a third unit on their lot.
Are you into building your own ADU? Or are you into? We had Joe Gebbia, who started Airbnb on. He's now got this ADU business that's blowing up in California in a big way.
Yeah, I talked to Joe a little while ago about that. We acquired a modular builder as well, and that's the goal. Is I think part of the solution is going to be people putting in ADUs, converting it, because not only does it help provide a home for somebody else, it provides income for the person.
And by the way, for anybody who hasn't been following along, what is that, alternative dwelling unit?
Auxiliary dwelling unit, alternative dwelling unit, additional dwelling unit.
We know what it is.
On your own property.
Well, except for tiny houses suck. So they're not functional. Most of them aren't even to code. So
how do you really feel?
We're talking about houses that are actually functional for people. They're smaller, and it depends on the size of your lot, but we want to make sure it actually functions for how people live.
The biggest issue is
she shed, isn't it?
I mean, there could be anything you want. Yeah, you could have it as a she shed. Somebody else might have a man cave, whatever you want. But the other thing that I think is important, that's only part of the solution, because it also helps offset household income with more revenue. But I think finding ways to do larger builds. So looking for nonprofits, looking for unused city property, things like that, where we can do large builds for multifamily housing. That's probably the most important part of this.
A huge part of that has to be the local zoning laws, and that's not, there's a patch quilt of things.
I can tell you what the biggest part of it is. The biggest part is every time they propose affordable housing, because I can guarantee you federally and locally, they're trying to find housing solutions, because every major city has a problem. Every time they find a property they want to do it, people show up and they petition. They say, no, I don't want it in my backyard. No, forget this.
Well, the problem is it affects all of us.
Well, part of our business is if we can set up to meet regulation here in California, we can do it anywhere in North America because it's so tight here. And I find we have a fund that we've launched and we're in our raise right now, and we're looking at a lot of opportunities that will help bring costs down for the home. And that's the main thing for us. We just want families to enjoy where they live and be able to afford it.
But how much of this is what I describe as like an Airbnb style play, which is to say folks who have their own home, then they add an ADU, and the ADU is really meant as a rental income property.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's not short-term rental is not the solution here. Long-term rental is more of a solution. We need homes for families. We don't need vacation properties.
And I think we've seen a big yank back on that industry as well, where a lot of areas are not allowing you to do the Airbnb style thing, particularly like right here in New York.
But you've seen that. You go on
problem.
TikTok, and you can learn very quick. I mean, my kids are always like, Dad, we should be arbitraging the Airbnb business. If you rent a place, you rent it on a long-term basis, then charge even more on a short-term basis. This is a huge market.
Yeah.
You watch those guys and say, that's crazy? Or do you say...
Oh, no, there is opportunity there. But the thing is, there's also a lot more legwork that goes into short-term. You can get a premium. But I personally, with the portfolio I have out in Charlotte where I've been investing, it's just a lot more affordable than California. And then also up in Canada. We're looking at long-term, and these are all going to be, we have single families and we have multis. It's all going to be rental properties, but it's going to be reasonable pricing.
By the way, if you're getting your real estate advice on TikTok, solely on TikTok, this is a PSA for anyone out there.
That's a PSA
There's no shortage.
Some Sorkin family members should be listening to you.
No shortage of people out there giving advice who have no purpose giving advice. They don't know what they're talking
But they
about.
tell you about all the millions of dollars they're making.
Yeah, exactly, as they live in their parents' basement. Great tie back. But the one thing I think is very important is we have learned this because we started trying to do the get-rich-quick stuff, flip properties, flip here. When we were 18 years old, we started. After being in this business, as long as we've been in this business, I don't even know how old I am now, 30 or 25 years we've been doing real estate. The one thing we've learned is 46. If you plan long-term, you will be more successful in the end. If you're trying to do the get-rich-quick, you'll have more stress, more anxiety, and you will not make more money.
Let me ask you guys about inflationary prices, not just in mortgages being higher, but just the cost of everything it takes to build a house, to do a renovation has gone up. We saw so many people who were thrilled with trying to do these renovations when we were locked in because of COVID, but we also saw inflation prices hit up. Would you be the one who would be doing a little bit more of like buying the lumber and getting involved on the pricing side of those things?
Yeah, so that was a huge problem that we had because not only, we had everything from, COVID surging, lack of trades. Trade costs is actually probably one of the biggest things. So we're seeing a lot of solutions come out that require shorter times on build sites because the labor costs are so high. You're going to see, which is part of what our fund is investing as well, you're going to see new service providers, platforms, technologies, as well as products that are going to help bring down those costs. Things did level quite a bit after the supply shortages, Riaz Canal, all that stuff, but you still see that we're probably 30-40% higher than we were.
And also, what we're investing is every aspect of home where you can find ways to reduce your shipping costs and labor costs. And again, with our panelized system for housing, it's real units, real houses, but we can stack these panelized systems 4 or 5 high. And I think getting outside the box and thinking differently for how you build is going to help a lot of people get into investing in a second home, an ADU, or even a full building that's more affordable than what's out there. In California, we've been talking to, I've been talking to the city, and they're trying to find ways to get the cost down because right now they're paying about $800,000 to $850,000 per one-bedroom unit to try and move people off the street. That alone is ridiculous for a one-bedroom unit to have to pay $850,000. So we're trying to help find solutions with what we can bring to the table.
What should we expect from the show? Again, the show's starting in 2 days.
Don't hate your home. Don't hate your house with the property brothers. It's like people who are at the end of their rope. They do not know what to do. They are ready to walk away from these houses, walk away from the problems. And we're trying to say to people, I know it's frustrating. We're going to get you through. It's almost like DIY therapy. But you will see us, we're going to, tell people how it is. You're going to see people have breakdowns, people that are losing their minds. We did the finale of this season is our parents' home because we've moved them to Santa Monica. It was a 2-episode arc that we did.
We definitely didn't want them to hate their home because they were living in their dream home up in the Rocky Mountains in Banff, Canada, and they came down here to be close to the grandkids. So Mom, you had a long list of wants in that house, but I hope we got it right.
So are you putting a strong buy on Home Depot? Is that basically, it's now I looked at it, it's just off an all-time high.
So
the whole trend is going, you just sold me on Home Depot stock.
You're going to see a drastic change in how a lot of these major retailers are operating now. They're sort of throwing out the old playbook. They're looking at new ways to engage, particularly with a younger consumer. Challenge is, it's very hard for younger consumers to get into real estate now, but that's the big thing right now. We've been approached by many of the major retailers trying to find ways, how can we get them in the store? And I think part of it is going to be content driven. So back to TikTok, you're going to see a lot of social media, live selling, things like that. You're going to see a surge of new innovation to try and get younger people who aren't necessarily going into the store as often to purchase.
And that's why they like a brand like us, because we own a production company. We also have an in-house digital and editorial team, so they want content badly, and they want faces that are known for homes.
You guys seem like Lowe's. Are you Lowe's guys or Home Depot guys?
We have product in both, actually.
Yeah, but which do you like better? You both are kind and gentle and fashionable.
For me, Bros is what I like. Lowe's, Home Depot, they're great, but Bros, we're going to launch a new shop.
New one called Bros.
Yeah.
See, I don't feel comfortable in either. Lowe's or Home Depot.
Well, I mean, that's the thing.
That's why they gave you the she
shed. Yeah, they told me I should have a she shed.
Everybody's shifting their strategies a little bit too. I think you're going to see a different way that Home Depot's marketing, Lowe's as well. I mean, Lowe's has, they have a tech incubation in-house. You've been there. I haven't actually been there, and it's pretty amazing to see what they're investing in and what they're trying to bring.
I've actually been to both headquarters because it's obviously an important part of our business. And we distribute 12,500 products that we manufacture. And so one of the things I've been saying for the longest time, and one of them will figure it out, why don't we do a series of workshops across the country where we show up? Because everybody's got projects.
To show you how to do it yourself.
To show people how to do something. Let's engage with people who want to fix their home. It's what our brand is about. It's what the new show is about. And I think that would be really great. But
Jonathan, Drew, want to thank you guys very much again. The show's out in 2 days.
Yes, very excited.
I'm
Don't
excited.
hate your house.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't hate your house.
And that's the podcast for today. A new week. Thanks for starting it with us. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernan, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern and get the best takes, analysis, interviews, jokes, whatever from our TV show right into your ears every day when you follow Squawk Pod wherever you get your podcasts. We'll meet you right back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.